The woods outside Jerek had always been a place of whispers and shadows, but now they held something far worse than local superstition. Marcus had lived in the small Missouri town his entire life, yet he'd never known true fear until the disappearances began. First it was Dale, a local hunter who knew those woods better than anyone. Then Thomas, who'd gone searching for Dale. By the time 6 men had vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but abandoned vehicles and desperate families, the town of Jerek had begun to fracture under the weight of collective terror. The whispers started in the corners of Hank's tavern, spreading like infection through the town. Something inhuman was hunting in their woods. Something that walked upright but wasn't a man. Something with eyes that glowed red in the darkness, tracking its prey with methodical precision. Most dismissed it as hysteria, a way to process the inexplicable. Marcus wasn't so sure. The autumn air bit at Marcus's face as he checked his rifle for the 3rd time. Beside him, Rufus and Wade performed similar rituals with their weapons, their breath forming ghostly plumes in the moonlight. None of them spoke of the fear churning in their guts. They'd known each other since childhood, communicating now in the shorthand of lifelong friendship, a nod, a glance, the subtle positioning of bodies as they moved deeper into the woods. The full moon overhead cast everything in a silvery glow that transformed the familiar landscape into something alien and hostile. Shadows stretched like grasping fingers across the forest floor. Every snap of a twig in the distance caused them to freeze, hearts hammering against their ribs. They were hunters themselves, men who'd tracked deer through these woods since boyhood. But tonight they felt like prey. Their camp was simple. 3 sleeping bags arranged around a small fire they kept deliberately low. Wade had brought a flask of whiskey which they passed between them, the alcohol burning a path to their stomachs but doing little to calm their nerves. "We should split up," Rufus suggested, his voice a harsh whisper that seemed to carry too far in the stillness. "Cover more ground." Marcus shook his head immediately. "That's exactly how those others disappeared. We stay together, no matter what." The unspoken hung between them. If something was out there hunting humans, their only chance was to face it as a group. The alternative, being taken alone, in the dark, was too horrific to contemplate. As midnight approached, the woods grew unnaturally silent. No insects chirping, no nocturnal creatures rustling in the underbrush. Just the sound of their own breathing and the occasional crack of burning wood from their dying fire. They found the shack just after 2 in the morning, a decrepit structure half reclaimed by the forest. Moonlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating a clearing that seemed deliberately maintained. Too perfect, too intentional. Wade spotted it first, a path of flattened grass leading to the sagging door. "Something's been coming and going," he whispered, voice trembling. The door hung askew on rusted hinges, and it took all 3 men to force it open against years of warping and decay. The stench hit them first, a cloying, sick-sweet odor of rot and chemicals that had them gagging, pressing sleeves against their faces. Then their flashlights revealed the horror within, and Marcus heard someone, perhaps himself, make a sound like a wounded animal. 13 bodies hung suspended from the rafters, swaying gently as if stirred by the men's entrance. Not fresh, but not decomposed either, preserved somehow, their skins pulled taut and waxy over distended frames. Their abdomens had been sliced open with surgical precision, emptied, then resealed with something that gleamed wetly in the flashlight beams. Some faces were frozen in expressions of agony. Others bore no expression at all, as if whatever had killed them had first emptied them of humanity. Marcus recognized Bill Tarver's face among them, missing since early summer. Wade identified his cousin Jeremy, gone these past 2 months. Each corpse wore a small metal tag around its ankle, inscribed with symbols none of them recognized. "What the fuck?" Rufus gasped, backing toward the door. "What the fuck is this?" Before either could answer, they heard it, footsteps approaching through the underbrush, deliberate and unhurried. Something that walked like a man but wasn't. They extinguished their flashlights simultaneously, primal instinct driving them to huddle in the shadows behind the hanging corpses. Through gaps between the bodies, they watched the door, the only exit from this charnel house. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by a soft humming sound that raised the hair on their arms. Marcus felt warm wetness spreading down his leg as his bladder released involuntarily. He bit his lip hard enough to draw blood, forcing back the scream building in his throat. The door swung open with practiced ease, admitting a figure that had to duck to enter the shack. In the moonlight streaming through the roof, they saw it clearly, impossibly tall, at least 7 feet, clad in a uniform of light green material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. But it was the head that caused Wade to make an involuntary sound of terror, bulbous and oversized, with no hair and skin so pale it appeared to glow faintly. When it turned, scanning the room with eyes like burning coals, Marcus knew with certainty that this was no man in a costume, no elaborate hoax. This was something that had no place on Earth. The creature moved methodically among the hanging bodies, checking the metal tags, occasionally removing small samples with delicate instruments produced from pockets in its uniform. It made notes in a device strapped to its wrist, the symbols matching those on the ankle tags. The movements were precise, clinical, a researcher checking experimental specimens. When Wade's boots scraped against the floorboard, the sound impossibly loud in the silence, the creature froze. Its head swiveled with unnatural smoothness, those burning eyes fixing exactly where they hid. Marcus felt his heart might explode from terror as he raised his rifle with trembling hands. Beside him, Rufus and Wade did the same, their faces contorted in silent terror. The creature took one deliberate step toward them, and they fired as one, a thunderous volley that should have torn it apart where it stood. The bullets never reached their target. They seemed to strike an invisible barrier inches from the creature's body, flaring briefly before dropping harmlessly to the ground. The creature tilted its head, reminiscent of a curious bird, then reached into a pocket and withdrew what looked like a small metallic cylinder. Before they could reload or run, it pointed the device at them. A pale blue light enveloped the 3 men, and Marcus felt every muscle in his body lock rigid. He couldn't blink, couldn't scream, couldn't even tremble. Only his eyes remained functional, forced to witness what came next with unflinching clarity. The creature approached them with unhurried steps, leaning down to examine their paralyzed forms with those terrible red eyes. It made a sound, something between a click and a hum, that might have been satisfaction. Up close, Marcus could see fine details of its face, translucent skin revealing a network of vessels that pulsed with fluid too pale to be blood, nostrils that were mere slits, a lipless mouth that didn't move when it vocalized. It smelled of ozone and something else, something metallic and foreign. The creature studied them individually, its head moving in mechanical increments as it catalogued their features. It removed another device from its belt, this one longer, with a crystalline tip that emitted a thin beam of purple light. When it pressed this against Wade's chest, the beam penetrated like a physical object, drilling through fabric, flesh, and bone with equal ease. Wade's eyes bulged, the only expression his paralyzed face could manage as the creature methodically vivisected him where he stood. Blood poured from the widening incision, steaming in the cool air as internal organs were exposed. The creature extracted something from Wade's abdomen, his liver, Marcus thought hysterically, examining it before placing it in a container produced from another pocket. Through it all, Wade remained conscious, his eyes registering incomprehensible agony. The creature moved to Rufus next, performing the same methodical dissection. Marcus, forced to watch his friends being harvested while alive, felt something in his mind begin to crack under the strain of terror. Whether it was the creature's error or some quirk of Marcus's physiology, the paralysis began to fade from his extremities as the alien finished with Rufus and turned its attention to him. The sensation returned to his fingers first, then his hands, a tingling rush like the worst pins and needles imaginable. The creature raised its cutting tool, the purple beam humming to life inches from Marcus's chest. In that moment, primal survival instinct overrode everything else. With a hoarse scream that tore at his throat, Marcus threw himself backward, his partially freed limbs responding just enough to send him crashing into the hanging corpses. The alien made a sound, surprise, perhaps, and adjusted its stance to follow. Marcus scrambled on all fours between the swaying bodies, using them as obstacles between himself and the creature as he fought his way toward the door. His legs still moved awkwardly, coordination returning in sporadic bursts that sent him careening into walls and stumbling over uneven floorboards. Behind him, the creature moved with fluid grace, unhurried, as if confident in the inevitable outcome of this chase. Marcus burst through the door into the moonlit clearing, his mind focused on one thing only: the car, parked a quarter-mile away on the old logging road. His feet found their rhythm as the paralysis continued to fade, terror lending him speed he'd never known he possessed. He didn't look back, couldn't bear to see if those red eyes were gaining on him. The forest blurred around him as he ran, branches whipping his face, roots threatening to snare his feet. Every shadow seemed to conceal another tall, pale figure waiting to intercept him. Somehow, whether through blind luck or the creature's indifference, Marcus reached the car. His hands shook so violently he could barely force the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as he glimpsed movement at the edge of the tree line, a tall silhouette, watching. The headlights of Marcus's pickup cut through the pre-dawn darkness as he careened down the winding road toward Jerek, taking curves at speeds that threatened to send him off the mountainside. His mind replayed the night's horrors in an endless loop, Wade's eyes bulging as the creature cut into him, Rufus twitching as his organs were extracted, the 13 preserved bodies swinging gently from the rafters. By the time he reached Hank's Tavern, the only place still lit at this hour, Marcus was barely coherent. He stumbled through the door, clothes soaked with sweat and Wade's blood, eyes wild and face scratched from branches. 5 men sat at the bar, local insomniacs and third-shift workers nursing beers. They turned as one at his entrance, their expressions shifting from surprise to horror as Marcus collapsed to his knees and began to speak in broken, hysterical bursts. He told them everything: the shack, the bodies, the alien with its red eyes and clinical curiosity, the weapons that had no effect, the friends he'd left behind. With each detail, the men's faces grew paler, several making warding gestures or clutching at hidden crosses beneath their shirts. That was 3 months ago. Marcus hasn't spoken since that night, not a single word, though the doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with his throat or vocal cords. He sits at the window of his sister's house in Jerek, staring at the tree line visible in the distance. The official investigation concluded that Wade and Rufus were killed by a person or persons unknown, their bodies mutilated by a disturbed individual. The shack, when authorities finally located it based on Marcus's frantic directions, contained no bodies, no evidence of the atrocities he described. Just empty space and decades of dust. Most in Jerek believe Marcus went mad with grief after his friends were killed by a very human murderer, perhaps even that Marcus himself might be responsible. But there are others who've noticed how the streets empty at sunset now, how parents call their children inside well before dusk. They've seen the pale faces peering from windows when the full moon rises, heard the whispers of strange lights moving through the woods at night. In Hank's Tavern, they still speak of what Marcus told them, voices hushed and eyes darting toward the door. And none of them, not a single soul in Jerek, ventures into those woods after dark anymore. They know what waits there, patient and curious, with its collection of specimens and its tools that cut through flesh like paper. They know that it watches, and studies, and hunts. And they know, with the bone-deep certainty of prey animals sensing a predator's gaze, that it isn't finished with them yet.